If you're new here, I'm Rob from Hey Summit, and this is the daily-ish show where I get to have awesome conversations with brilliant people doing really interesting things. We talk about the creator mindset, staying authentic, assembling your toolkit, exploring platforms, and a whole lot more. It's a pretty relaxed show about and for creators, thought leaders, and independent entrepreneurs. And just a reminder, depending on how you're engaging with us, whether it's live right now or on the podcast later on, a conversation is best when it's shared. So however you're tuning in, please feel free to jump in with your thoughts, your questions, your perspectives. And thanks very much for spending a bit of time with us. I'm really, really happy to welcome Matt Gartland to the show. Matt is co-CEO of SPI Media, the company behind SPI, Smart Passive Income, the brand created by his friend and partner, Pat Flynn. SPI Media was forged when Pat and Matt joined forces as business partners at the end of 2018. I'd love to kind of dig into that and how that all happened. Before then, Matt co-founded, or was a partner in several startup companies, one of which being an e-commerce SaaS product that has since gone on to raise about $75 million in venture capital. Today, Matt focuses on leading SPI Media as well as investing in and advising creator-based startups, including Hey Summit. Matt, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for the kind intro.
So I guess I want to jump in and talk. Love to get into questions around the creator mindset and what you see, especially working closely with creators for years now. But I'd love to start with your specific journey. I mean, you started in the corporate world. You kind of became a creator yourself. You worked in the agency world as well. You co-founded a tech company. Can you walk me through, like, how did this all work? Was this a journey from one point to another based on some grand plan, or how did you make the shift from this kind of a maybe more corporate background to a creator and then working with creators?
I would say not a perfectly grand plan. I had intention, and I think like a lot of us, there's vision, big picture goals, dreams we want to chase. And then if we pursue sort of a steering versus aiming sort of mindset, right? You sort of navigate your way through opportunities, hopefully learn and play forward some of those lessons from one new venture to the next. I've definitely had my failures along the way. Some ventures, sort of failure to launch or did get off the rocket pad and didn't maybe go that far thereafter. So that, I think, like a lot of us, that's been the journey. I've been certainly quite fortunate and lucky along the way. I think luck plays a role. And as we creators continue to try to build audiences and businesses, just positioning ourselves and our ventures looks like a game of luck sometimes. We just have to position ourselves to get lucky sometimes. So I'm grateful for that.
And in terms of like and again, this is just really about the mindset shift. I feel like at least it looks like a very natural progression and a very natural evolution for you. But it also kind of seems like there's a lot of mindset shift that has had to happen in your own kind of career move. Being a creator and identifying as a creator, is that different to then reframing and looking at how you instead can support other creators? Or do you find that it's actually a very similar type of mindset that you approach in building a creator focused company, not just being a creator yourself?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I'll try to, I guess, dig into some specifics also for whatever value that they do have with my journey and kind of what that means now to Pat and me and doing SPI and some of the other things that you teed up there, which is I really try to bring as much parity just between the genuine creative, so creator side, along with the business side and the logic and the analysis and the business modeling, right? That is required to, in fact, stay healthy, stay profitable, and grow. And I cut a lot of that teeth in my first agency, my first creative agency that did go on 8 years later, or maybe 7, to then merging into SPI with Pat at the 2018. Along the way, had some other ventures along the side. I was creating my own content, so I was a creator. I had a podcast during those days, focused on like authors, or at least that's kind of like a start. Author MBA, and it got to some notable size. Nothing like Pat's show ever got to, but had some really great people on. Grew, helped the agency grow, and that's how I met Pat and became really close friends with Pat. And then we sort of had a very sort of symbiotic growth pattern, right? So as Pat grew, we grew because he was one of our better clients. And then as we grew, we could parlay some of that learning from the creator side and the business side back into Pat and me, increasingly almost starting to become sort of a pseudo business partner even before we were formal business partners. And that was some really special chemistry we started to detect. And that's sort of this like happy accident. I started to kind of sense that, and so did he. And if anyone else out there is, in the agency world or has been a part of the agency world in the past, like traditionally speaking, the cliches, it's really hard. It's a lot of 60, 70-hour weeks. Traditionally anyway, it's a grind. It's service. It's a lot of time for dollars, a lot of things that like you learn a lot. And I'm grateful for all those experiences, but maybe you don't always want to do that. And we see that now, again, the kind of this maybe tentpole concept of like, how do we play forward some of these concepts into how we teach creators now, whether they're podcasters, independent freelancers, or whatever, is, more of a shift towards value-based pricing, a shift maybe away from just trading time for dollars. I still think service work is really important. And my background's been able to parlay that into, SPI Media, which again, we kind of produced a baby company when we merged our two companies together at the end of 2018. And a lot of those trials and errors and successes and failures are rooted in what we're doing now and why this is different than, what it was for SPI back in 2009, right? When Pat created this thing, it was predominantly just a blog. The whole economy is different. The whole creator economy specifically, the whole meta economy. And the big thing now, as Rob, and it's so exciting, is that at least I see, and maybe it's not universally accepted, but I see a lot of the future of the creator economy actually not being products. So for the last, 5, 6, 7 years, it's been information products of different flavors, online courses, but in a more DIY nature. These are like infinitely scalable, right? Or that's been a lot of the teaching and the logic, and it worked for a while. But I'm really excited because I see a big part of the future actually being away from that and more back into services. It's more, I want access, I want peer-to-peer or small group or cohort. So we see now the emergence of cohort-based courses, and we are running some of those at SPI. So, and I'm trying to stitch a lot of thoughts together here. Maybe I'm rambling, but it's this idea of like, navigating through these different, ventures, and even like the tech side of it also. Like you learn a ton through that in terms of how you use capital, how you manage capital, working capital, cash flow, and then being able to parlay that into not only the operations of SPI, like ourselves, but then teaching that stuff forward to our own creators that we have the privilege to serve. So I'm just trying to find as many commonalities and common threads as possible and tie it all together.
I think one of the things that you managed to do with your approach and SPI Media's approach in general, which I think is, I don't know, maybe the bottled magic, or whatever you want to call it, is this approach of the creator mindset with service to creators, with education to creators, but also authenticity being a really not only important driver for showing up the right way, but having that as the way in which you as a creator will get out. And I think like, get your audience out or grow your audience. And I mean, I think anybody who engages with SPI is, they have a very different relationship, or they have a very different type of experience than maybe some of the other types of what you call, I guess, communities for creators out there. And I think that the fact that it's very deliberate, everything that you all do, at least seems to be very deliberate and very purposeful. And I thought that even the fact that you and Pat are co-CEOs of this, of SPI Media, it's very deliberate. A lot of these actions are very, very deliberate. And in what, on one hand, knowing you or interacting with you, it makes it, and knowing Pat makes a lot of sense. But on the other hand, it's not necessarily the thing that you jump to when you're thinking of a creator, someone who is by their very nature building their own brand. They are selling themselves, and control, founders dilemmas, control motivated versus wealth motivated. Talk about that all day, but usually control motivated people. How has SPI Media, and if we're talking meta as for a second, how has SPI Media been maybe a culmination of the creator mindset and building two creator-led businesses in other ways? How do you think of it as a model for other creators to maybe look at when they when they reach the point where they need to grow even larger and bring on a larger team and group people. I don't know if that makes any sense as a question.
No,
I'm just trying to
it
get in
tracks.
terms of like
Yeah.
your kind of your step level here.
Yeah, I think the keystone there is that you mentioned authenticity, but authenticity in the business model, right? To really own the value you're providing and find a fair economic, right, for that, whatever price tag you want to put on it, and then understand how that economic actually supports the cost of the business. So especially as creators are growing and you're taking on additional software costs, maybe you do reach a threshold where you want to hire a VA to offload some of the administrative work, right? There's costs associated to that. A lot of people, are approaching creator-based businesses from the creator side, and that's not a criticism. It's not a fault. It's magnificent, really. But again, I'm trying to myself through my partnership with Pat and what we do through SPI, but then also on the teaching side of like what we expose is to suggest strongly that at different growth points, learn the business side too. Don't just learn podcasting. Yes, learn podcasting, right? But also learn cash flow and cash flow management. Because as your growth, in fact, grows, right, as that compounds, and that's what we all want. We want to see increasing amounts in our bank account, et cetera, especially if they can be in some way automated or made passive through recurring revenue and all the things that we're chasing as entrepreneurs, right? It's that, and I believe this truly, that unmanaged growth will oftentimes lead you into more trouble or kill you faster than like not having enough growth. Because it's like, what do I do now? Like, I have all this capital, how do I use it? Or I have all this money because I've had a successful launch. I can go out and hire a bunch of people, but if you don't have operating budgets and structures in place, if you don't have good accounting partners, et cetera, then you can really run into trouble and then not know that, oh, like my burn rate's negative and I'm going to be out of runway in 3 months, which are terms that come from maybe the tech world, right? But they're also very true to the creator world. So
it's especially the creator world that is so aligned with the idea of bootstrapping and the idea of building up an audience, and then whether it's monetizing that audience or at least making yourself self-sufficient or moving towards self-sufficiency. If you're starting off as a side project, there's a lot of this these elements or at least it seems as though the idea of bootstrapping yourself and bootstrapping your efforts is a good indication that what it is that you're doing is being successful. And so, as you say, like if you start to see early success with that, there's some challenge around that too, because just as much as you can go up, you can go down. The algorithms could change. Like there's so many different elements that kind of go into things.
Yeah, and we try to, as always, lead by example and teach by example. Yeah. So we're trying to do this ourselves around like we deplatformed from Facebook, right? Simply because we wanted more direct control and more direct communication pathways, right, with our audience. So we have what we call the SPI Academy. It's a free community on the Circle platform, but then that's also the same technology platform anyway that we use for SPI Pro, which is our membership-based, application-oriented program. We don't let everyone in. These are intentional choices. At least they are right now, and we learn from them. But it's working. And then how we think about figuring out how we staff for that, and actually community, because that's definitely a very in vogue term right now, and for good reason. But we have to be careful with how we define some of these terms as they're starting to catch fire. Is I see this as a service. A lot of people might argue differently, say, oh, like no, this is a product, it's MRR, but I have to hire a community manager. My CX team, my community experience team, is now 3 full-time people with salaries, with healthcare. They pay taxes, right? So this is to me like a service. I have to put human beings there to at least live out our vision and value set for how we define community, and that is resonating, in fact, with a pretty substantial audience set that like wants to be a part of this. We have 520, 530 some members, I think right now. So, and we need to care for them and continue to earn that value and earn their membership every day.
Do you find that the language, the prevailing language of like, build your products and turn yourself into a product, do you think that do you find that's a bit harmful sometimes, or do you find like would it be better for people to approach it a little bit more in a pure sense and thinking of their kind of creative journey as potentially a service driven endeavor?
I do think there are traps along the way that people can fall into. If you're only thinking about it as a product, you're not thinking about how that product is, iterated upon. Like if you're thinking of yourself as a product, how do you create version 2 and version 3? Mm-hmm. How do you create adjacent or sister products, right, that are complementary in nature? How do you scale all of that if you're at the center of all of that? And to kind of even as a thread go back to my relationship with Pat and how our partnership works, and even sort of that co-CEO paradigm, which has its flaws. Believe me, I'm not some guy that's just touting that as like a holy grail model. It has its challenges, but is that there has to be an idea that like, okay, Pat's almost full-time creator again, because that's what's right for the business in this moment in its life cycle, right? And I now basically run the business almost myself, but then we're complementary sort of in our, if you will, power structure to be able to make decisions within the company, so that there's a healthy sort of offset there, right? Like that the creator side isn't overpowering the very, the important necessities of the business, but then also the business imperatives aren't squashing, right? Like the creative potential, right? Yeah. So we're trying to keep that in harmony, and in balance. So, Pat certainly being someone who is, you could say to your point around like, okay, he's the product in a lot of ways. It's like, okay, how do I care about the product? How do I scale Pat? How do we bring even then other creators into the mix that then can kind of be wingmen to Pat? And we're starting to do that a little bit. Me, not that I have maybe that appetite to become like fully popular, 100,000 Twitter followers, because that's not me. But like Jay, that on my team, he's my CX director, and he's a podcaster of his own regard and a really great one. He has his own private show, so definitely a creator. It's like, okay, cool. Like, let's elevate Jay. Let's think about him that can help create other versions of products, types of products, or experiences, so services. And that's how we think about scaling product. That's sort of, I would say, creator-led or like person-driven or personality-driven.
Do you find that, so I mean, like talking a bit about dynamics and kind of what works, what doesn't, I think typically when somebody is starting off on their own, especially maybe someone like a lot of people who certainly watch this and write in about it, they are thinking about becoming a creator. They are working maybe in the corporate environment, but they're thinking about doing that side project, and or they're thinking about going and being a coach or going into consulting or something like that. And there's a lot of pressure that one puts on oneself, because especially when you're just starting out, because literally every no is like, well, that's me that they're saying no to. They're saying, I don't like you. That's what they're saying. They're not saying, oh, this product isn't the right product, or this service that you're providing, I don't need the service right now. They're just passing judgment on you, or at least that's how it feels. And I think that there's a lot of loneliness, there's a lot of challenge, there's a lot of frustration that kind of comes with that. And it's stuff that you have to kind of work through. You have to kind of make sure that you're being mindful of. Otherwise, it's easy to kind of get yourself down. When you're now at a different level where you're also building a company and you're also running a company, and you're responsible for salaries, you're responsible for all this other stuff, regardless of it being, whether it's about SPI Media or your previous businesses that you've run and managed, how do you manage that potential loneliness, that potential that how do you take care of your mental health? Are there communities of advisors or other spaces where you go to in order to get support or to bounce ideas off of each other? How does that work, especially being kind of a community-led business and being at the top of it?
Yeah, it definitely starts with the partnership I have with Pat. I mean, he's first and foremost a close friend. So there is that to acknowledge, and that's quite important. But yeah, along the way, being lonely as an entrepreneur, my first venture, the creative agency, that was, again, the one that 7 years later we merged together. I was the sole founder. I didn't have a business partner. Again, I kind of became a pseudo business partner with Pat along the way. So that got to a point where the loneliness, maybe just in that one business, was starting to be, absolved through Pat and then just some other friends I kind of, built relationships with along the way. I think the power of partnership is remarkable. I think it doesn't get discussed enough, especially within the creator community, only because a lot of creators start off as just them, right? It's their personal brand, it's their personal project. These aren't criticisms. It's just like, that's the point of origin. But then as you grow and evolve, I do encourage folks, especially if you start to find some magic and stuff starts to really take off and it gets daunting. You feel maybe, out of your depth on something, because maybe you are, like, look for a partner. It doesn't have to be super formal at the beginning. You could find other constructs to like have partners. There's such a thing as like fractional business partners for hire. Like you can Google that and you can like find people, or like fractional COOs or CFOs, and start to augment, some of your loneliness, some of your just decision fatigue, as the sole person that's trying to make it all work. Right. That's part of the crippling stuff that maybe, again, doesn't get discussed enough, which is, that the decision-making, power is a power, but is also a real drain, mental drain, energy drain, et cetera. So Pat and I were able to bounce, ideas off each other. I'm responsible for a healthy set of decisions. He's responsible for a different set, right, of healthy decisions. And certainly then there's other constructs outside of just an actual partnership. Yes, there's masterminds. Those have been around for forever. Pat's a part of several. I'm a part of 2 at this point. There's professional associations. If people get, what they want to go into, like the Vistage program, there's like pseudo MBA sort of stuff that you could get into. And those are valuable at a certain threshold. If you want to put, some of them are expensive. So if you want to put the cost involved, if you're willing to make that investment and the time, those are definitely ways to learn, to network, and to offset some of this loneliness and decision fatigue. But I just come back to actually an important part that I didn't mention. One is business partnership. I believe in. It's like, I believe in, the institution of marriage. Like I believe that. Or some sort of domestic partnership and something really formal. I think it's so powerful to have a real partner. And then second is building your own team. So if it is right for you as a creator, as you're pursuing your dream and your venture, and however that might grow, consistent with wherever you might want it to grow, is like there's such relief. There's such, and not just relief of like, oh, I don't have to do everything anymore, I can hand it off, but like relief in knowing if you can build the culture within your team the right way, that's also, at least for me, like a solve for some of the loneliness. Not that I go to my team and I complain that I'm lonely. Like that's not what I'm suggesting, but just like being around this group of people that I've helped bring together, and that I have helped train and coach and amplify their abilities and see their growth. And now we're all doing this really awesome stuff together. That is a cure for me. When I have low moments, because we do, of like, oh, especially, pandemic, COVID era, it's like, sure. Like I love my team. It's hard to, it's like a family. It's, there's difficulties with team, but like, I'm just so grateful for the team.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, it's as you say, it's not about like complaining or going around. It's maybe just a subtle acknowledgement that like, hey, you know what? I was able to bring these people together. I really think that we're building something awesome. And so it might not be all that bad, at certain points. Speaking of like things that, a creator surrounding themselves with their team, whatever that is, maybe that's their advisors or mentors or what have you. Are there specific like challenges, especially you see tons of creators at all different stages. Are there specific challenges that or pitfalls that you see creators often fall into, especially if they were, maybe starting out today, that maybe just through your experience, you think, you can kind of tell this a mile away?
Oh, sure. The first one, vivid one, actually goes back to the founder's dilemma that I think you kind of made a passing reference to a little bit ago, which I want to say was born from the tech community. A lot of these darn things are. It is what it is. Which is this paradox between pursuing like wealth, and a wealth-driven motivation, and a control-driven motivation. And I see a lot of creators erring on the control side and limiting their growth potential, as at least in one way measured by like income or wealth, right? Because they feel like they have to make every decision, and they're reluctant for different reasons to give up control or the illusion of control, or we could have a whole psychology class about that. So there's a lot of great stuff out there from a lot of smart people. Again, Slants Tech, if people want to like Google what the founder's dilemma is, like it's an actual thing. That's I think like the primary trap, and there's different manifestations of it. But even thinking about Pat again and his journey, my journey, how we intersected. He wrote a book at the 5-year anniversary of his experience with SPI, actually not even just SPI, but like getting let go, his personal like career story, right? If for folks that know it, or I should say, sorry, folks that don't know it, is he was an architect before he got on the internet and had like this dream job as an architect. And then during the Great Recession, he lost that job. But along the way had sort of accidentally stumbled into internet marketing, and had a niche website that he had organized his study notes for some very prestigious, difficult exam in the architecture industry. And could like, he monetized that basically overnight. And that was, the beginning of all of this. So at the 5-year anniversary really of that, he wrote a book called Let Go. It was called Let Go. And that sort of poetically, this, I think, illustration, right, of this founder's dilemma, and increasingly getting comfortable is maybe one way of saying it, or curious, maybe even would be better, to let someone else help and give up some of the reins and have sharing of power, which is again weird. At some point, if you have a business partner, you have to talk about operating agreements, stuff like that. But yeah, that's the number one trap, by far.
And then on the flip side, are there specific, like, I mean, I guess maybe we can infer what they might be, specific like tips, especially if somebody is just starting out, and maybe they have a lot of this expectation for immediate success, maybe any kind of quick like mindset things that they should be focusing on.
Oh gosh, I mean, I would point to Gary V, Chris Guillebeau, and so many others that are more, I think, equipped and credible to say this, which is, yeah, there is no overnight success. Chris Guillebeau has an amazing guide from his early journey as a blogger turned podcaster turned creator. All these terms have evolved over the last decade and a half. Called 279 Days to Overnight Success. Is something just poetic like that.
Wonderful.
Gary Vee has talked about just like how he kept showing up with Wine TV in his early days before he was really, I think, really anything, at least online. Seth Godin has talked about that in different capacities as well. And it's getting harder. At least I think that, as being more, again, on the business side, not even the creator side, but I know Pat feels that too, or sees that, and from his contacts and networks, et cetera. This fragmented, attention crazy economy in society, we're living in, and everything is instant and fractile, et cetera. So it's harder to break through. So it's continuing to show up, try not to burn yourself out, because that's a real bloody thing, especially in the last year and a half. Trying to be different, being okay with being opinionated, and honestly, even ourselves at SPI, like typically like the happy-go-lucky guys, and that's real. But we're even trying to like amplify our own, like, no, we actually really care about this in a very, very opinionated way, and trying to get our own opinions in there more. And then that'll help you stand out. So if you can maintain your energy and be consistent and keep showing up, and then add in what Wes, one of the founders of Maven, which we love that platform for cohort-based online courses, it's her term, is like spiky opinions. The idea of being a bit spiky, right? Being kind of like not rude or not, to make an argument for argumentation's sake, but like, I care deeply and I have experience, so I believe this, and being like okay with that. That's, I think, increasingly how you kind of break through and be real and be authentic and get people to subscribe to you in some capacity and follow your work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for just taking a few minutes out of your day to kind of chat. And if anybody out there is interested in learning more about the future of audience building and monetization within the creator economy, from Matt, from Pat, from the SPI team, and a whole bunch of really awesome special guests, and a kind of shameless plug, since we're involved as well, you can head on over to audience-driven.co. That's www.audience-driven.co. And that's the team's big virtual event, virtual summit coming up in October, and it will actually be hosted on Hey Summit. So check it out. Thanks so much again.
Thank you, Rob. Anytime. Glad to be here.